Okay. What I'm doing now is I am recording text for my project, The Baskets. To learn more about this particular project, please visit the link in the description. That'll take you to Kickstarter, where I'm trying to raise funds to take to the Piggyback Fringe Festival in Quebec. Short story of the long story is that this is the story of my family. I'm a Kuduk Indian from Northwest California, and this is a story of our family's basket collection and how it's helped to hold our family together throughout the generations. Now, a part of this story that I'm finding needs to be developed further is the controversy in the Sterrett branch of the family over whether or not to put the baskets into the Clark Museum. Now, they did, and that's where they still are. But I thought that a good way to address this controversy was to look at the account of somebody who seems like she was the leader of the opposition to this decision, Minerva Sterrett. She was one of the most vociferous opponents to Lee's decision to put the baskets into the Clark Museum. And she wrote an account, which is one of the two complete accounts of the story of the baskets, which I plan on telling. I'm going to read aloud just to give me a feel for how it flows. I'm going to read it aloud from the place where I feel like it really starts to talk about her problems with how the baskets ended up. This is about halfway through her full account. After building our log house on part of the Sterrett Ranch, Percy and I went to Alaska from 1936 to June 1942. We returned to Orleans in 1945 and moved into the log house. The P.L. Youngs were now in their late 70s. They were still living in the same house with the baskets on the wall in the living room. P.L. was a bit senile, but Aunt Elsie was very sharp mentally. The Sterrett family, including Percy and I, were looking after them in many ways, like shopping and getting their mail because P.L. could no longer drive. One afternoon in the late 40s, Percy and I were taking the mail and groceries to the Youngs and Mama Sterrett. We noticed smoke coming out of the roof of one of the young house. We drove quickly up to the house. Percy jumped out of the pickup, ran up the stairs, and began pounding on the door, which was locked. He was just ready to break the door down when Aunt Elsie threw it open. Those two old people had been sleeping. Percy got P.L. and Aunt Elsie out of the house. In the meantime, I drove down the hill to the Forest Service for help. But they had seen the smoke, and I met the fire truck on the way up the hill. After Aunt Elsie passed away, Elsie Hover wanted to display the baskets. Her mother, Julia, let her take the baskets, and she had some I sent her from Alaska, so the collection became larger. We thought it would be an education for others to see the collection. So Elsie kept them on display in her home and made some demonstrations in Eureka. By this time, Elsie began to think the baskets belonged to her alone. Time passed. We were living our lives and not thinking too much about the baskets. Elsie Hover had retired from teaching and was not well. She said something about selling the baskets, but I reminded her they were not hers to sell, according to Aunt Elsie Young's wishes. A young man in Eureka was trying to buy the baskets and had come to visit Elsie often. Elsie had been in the hospital several times and in a nursing home in Eureka. She wasn't herself and must have told him he could buy the baskets. Then Elsie died on March 28, 1973. Her husband, Paul, had a stroke the same day and died at 12:30 that night. We had a double funeral. The young man called the next day and said Elsie said he could buy the baskets from her husband after she had died. I answered the phone and said the baskets were not for sale. Things had changed. Percy and I talked to Lee Hover after the funeral and said we would come down later and decide what to do about the baskets. When we went to Lee and Helen Hover's home at Bayside to discuss the baskets, they would not answer the door. Lee and Helen did as they pleased about the baskets. Possession to them was 9/10 of the law. Percy and I didn't think it was worthwhile to go to court over the baskets since we already had many unpleasant experiences with Lee and Helen Hover over the Sterrett home place at Orleans where we were living in the 70s after our retirement. Now, this is Minerva's account of how the baskets came into Lee and Helen's possession before Lee transferred them to the Clark Museum in Eureka, California. Her account is venomous. And this is one of the reasons why Lee and Helen Hover really needed to check us out when they first met us. They actually ended up referring us to Minerva to find out more about the family history, but told us that we weren't going to hear any good things about them from her, and we didn't. So what I've done here is I've created an audio capture of Minerva's telling of the story, just to give me an idea when I listen to it later how it plays orally and orally. That I'm creating, and I'm going to put it on YouTube to raise awareness for this project, and so that I can refer you to the Kickstarter. The link is in the description, so that you can help me raise money to take this to Wakefield. Thanks for watching.